Welcome to the Midnight Teller. Before we dive into tonight's stories, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. I worked retail for about 3 years during and after college. It wasn't my dream job, but paid the bills and gave me flexible hours around my classes. I was a sales associate at a clothing store in a mid-sized shopping mall. The kind of place that was popular in the 90s but had been slowly declining for years. By the time I worked there, maybe half the storefront were empty, with for lease signs in the windows. The mall itself was 3 levels with a large central atrium. There were maybe 30 or 40 stores still operating, mostly national chains, a few local businesses hanging on. During the day, especially on weekends, it could still get busy with families, teenagers hanging out, older people doing their mall walking. But at night, after the stores closed at 9 p.m., the place emptied out fast. I usually worked the closing shift 2 or 3 nights a week. That meant staying until 9:30 or sometimes 10 p.m., depending on how much cleaning and restocking we had to do. Most of the time, I didn't mind. The store manager, Lisa, was cool, and my co-workers were decent people. We'd play music, joke around, and get the work done. But there was something unsettling about being in that mall after hours. The bright fluorescent lights would dim to emergency lighting only. The cheerful music that played during business hours would shut off, leaving just silence and the hum of HVAC systems. The empty corridors that had been full of shoppers just an hour before would be completely deserted. This happened about 6 months before I quit. It was a Thursday night in October, and I was working the closing shift with just one other person, a girl named Rebecca, who'd started a few weeks earlier. Lisa had left around 8:30 p.m. to handle some personal emergency, leaving Rebecca and me to close up. We finished our closing duties around 9:45 p.m. I counted the register, secured the cash in the safe, and we both grabbed our stuff from the back room. When we walked out of the store, pulling down and locking the security gate behind us, the mall was already dark and empty. "This place is so creepy at night," Rebecca said, looking down the long corridor toward the exit. The emergency lights cast weird shadows, and every store was locked behind metal gates. "Yeah, you get used to it," I said, though honestly, I never really had. We started walking toward the nearest exit, our footsteps echoing on the tile floor. The mall had a weird acoustic quality. When it was empty, every sound seemed amplified and distorted. We were maybe halfway to the exit when Rebecca grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" I stopped walking and listened. At first, I didn't hear anything. Then I did. Footsteps. Not ours. Someone else was walking somewhere in the mall, their shoes clicking on the tile floor. "Probably just security," I said, though something about the sound made me uneasy. We kept walking, but the footsteps continued. They weren't getting closer or farther away. They were maintaining the same distance, like whoever it was pacing us, staying parallel to our route, but on a different corridor. "Why aren't they using a flashlight?" Rebecca whispered. "Security always has flashlights." She was right. Mall security did their rounds with big mag lights, and you could always see the beams sweeping through the dark. But there was no light anywhere, just the footsteps, steady and deliberate. We walked faster. The footsteps matched our pace. When we slowed down, they slowed down. When we sped up, they sped up. My heart was pounding now. The exit was maybe 100 feet away. I could see the glass doors, the parking lot lights beyond them. That's when we heard it. A voice. Singing. It was faint, echoing from somewhere deeper in the mall. A woman's voice, high and clear, singing something I didn't recognize. The melody was pretty, almost like a lullaby, but there was something deeply wrong about hearing it in the dark, empty mall. "What the fuck?" Rebecca breathed. The singing continued, and now the footsteps were getting closer. Not walking anymore. Running. Heavy footsteps pounding on the tile, getting louder, coming from somewhere behind us. We ran. We just ran. We sprinted down that corridor toward the exit, our bags bouncing against our sides, our breath loud in our ears. Behind us, The footsteps were running too, and they were faster than us, closing the distance. I hit the exit door first, slamming into the push bar. It opened, and we tumbled out into the parking lot, into the cold night air and the blessed normalcy of streetlights and parked cars. We stood there, gasping for breath, staring back at the mall entrance. Through the glass doors, we could see the dark corridor we just escaped from. Empty, silent, no one running after us. No one there at all. Did you see anyone? Rebecca asked, her voice shaking. No, I said, but someone was there. We stood in the parking lot for a few more minutes, trying to calm down, trying to convince ourselves we'd imagined it or that it really was just security playing a prank. But I knew better. Security didn't run through the mall chasing employees, and they definitely didn't sing. The next day, I asked Lisa if security had reported anything unusual the night before. She said no. Everything had been normal. No incidents reported. I mentioned to a few other employees who worked closing shifts if they'd ever experienced anything weird after hours. Most of them laughed it off, but one guy, Tom, who'd worked there for 5 years, got quiet. Third floor, he said. Stay away from the third floor after closing. That's where it happens. Well, what happens? The footsteps, the singing, people seeing things. I don't know what it is, but everyone who's worked here long enough has a story. I asked him why he never mentioned it before. Because management doesn't like it when we talk about it. They think it scares new employees. But you should know, just stick to the ground floor exits when you close. Don't use the third floor exit. And if you hear footsteps or singing, just get out. Don't look back. Don't try to figure out what it is. Just leave. I followed his advice. For the remaining 6 months I worked there, I only used the ground floor exits, even if it meant walking farther. And on nights when I closed alone, I worked as fast as possible to get out before the mall got too dark and too quiet. I never heard the footsteps or singing again. But sometimes when I was locking up the store, I'd look down the long corridor toward the atrium and the escalators leading to the third floor, and I'd see something, just a flicker of movement, a shadow crossing between the emergency lights. Something that shouldn't be there. I quit that job in April. I told Lisa it was because I was graduating and moving away, which was partially true. But the real reason was that I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that mall after hours, whatever we'd heard that night, was getting more active, more present. And I didn't want to be there the night it decided to do more than just follow people to the exit. I worked as a security guard for about 4 years, mostly at office buildings and apartment complexes. It was exciting work, but it was steady and the overnight shifts paid a bit more. In my 3rd year, I got assigned to a shopping mall that needed overnight security coverage. The mall was struggling, operating on a skeleton crew, and they'd had some break-ins and vandalism that they wanted to prevent. My job was simple. Clock in at 10 p.m., do walking patrols of all 3 floors every hour, check that all the store gates were locked and secure, monitor security cameras, and clock out at 6 a.m. when the cleaning crew arrived. 5 nights a week, Tuesday through Saturday. The mall itself was built in the 1980s and hadn't been updated much since. It had that dated aesthetic, lots of brass railings and tinted glass, fountain in the center court that hadn't worked in years. During the day, it got moderate traffic, but nothing like its heyday. At night, it was completely dead. The first few weeks were uneventful. I'd do my patrols, check my cameras, read a book, or watch videos on my phone between rounds. The mall was creepy at night, sure. All that empty space, the dim emergency lighting, the silence. But I'd worked plenty of creepy locations before. You get used to it, but about a month in, things started to feel off. It started with sounds. I'd be sitting at my security desk in the ground floor office, watching the camera feeds, and I'd hear something. Footsteps above me. Not loud, not running. Just slow, steady footsteps, like someone walking through the 2nd floor. The first time I heard it, I assumed it was the old building settling or the HVAC system making noise. But the footsteps had a rhythm, a pattern. They'd walk for maybe 30 seconds, then stop, then start again. Always in the same area, directly above my office. I checked the cameras for the second floor, but I never saw anything. The corridors were empty. No movement. No one there. After a few nights of this, I decided to investigate in person. During my 2 a.m. patrol, I went straight to the section of the second floor where I'd been hearing the footsteps. It was the east wing, near what used to be a department store anchor, but was now just an empty space with boarded-up entrances. I walked slowly through that section, shining my flashlight into every alcove and corner. Nothing, just empty corridors, locked store gates, silence. But as I was walking back toward the central atrium, I felt it. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, but suddenly. One moment it was the normal cool temperature of the air-conditioned mall. The next it was cold, really cold. I could see my breath. I stopped walking and looked around. The emergency lights seemed dimmer here, like something was absorbing the light, and the silence felt wrong. Not peaceful, but oppressive, like something was waiting. That's when I heard it, a child laughing. Faint, distant, echoing from somewhere deeper in the east wing. A little kid's laugh, high and delighted, like they were playing a game. My blood went cold. There shouldn't be any children in the mall. There shouldn't be anyone in the mall except me. Hello. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. This is security. The mall is closed. You need to leave. The laughing stopped immediately. The silence that followed was even worse. I stood there for a moment, debating what to do. Part of me wanted to investigate, to find whoever was in there. But a larger part of me, the part that kept me alive through 4 years of security work, was screaming at me to get out of that wing and back to somewhere with better lighting and cameras. I chose the second option. I walked quickly back to the central atrium and took the escalator down to the ground floor. When I got back to my office, I immediately checked all the camera feeds for the second floor east wing. Nothing. No one. The corridors were completely empty. I wrote up in my incident report, noting that I'd heard possible intruders and investigated, but found no one. I didn't mention the cold or the child's laughter. That seemed like the kind of thing that would make management think I was crazy. But the incidents kept happening. Every few nights, I'd hear the footsteps. I'd feel the cold spots. And sometimes, I'd hear other sounds. Voices whispering. Music playing faintly, like someone had left a radio on somewhere. Once, I heard what sounded like a crowd of people talking and laughing, like the mall was full of shoppers. But when I checked the cameras and did patrol, everything was empty and silent. The worst night was about 2 months into the job. It was a Thursday, sometime around 3 a.m. I was doing my patrol of the third floor, the uppermost level. This floor was the deadest part of the mall. Maybe 5 or 6 stores still operating up here, and they were all small local businesses that barely got any traffic. I was walking past the old food court, which had been closed for years. All the restaurant spaces were empty, the counters stripped out, just bare walls and floors. But as I walked by, I heard something that made me stop. Dishes clattering, the sound of silverware on plates, people talking, all the sounds of a busy food court, coming from the empty space. I turned my flashlight toward the food court. It was completely dark, just empty spaces where restaurants used to be. But the sounds continued. I could hear conversations, laughter, the scrape of chairs on tile. Then as I stood there, I saw it. Movement in the darkness. Shadows that didn't match any light source. Shapes of people sitting at tables that weren't there, walking to counters that didn't exist. I felt dizzy, disoriented. It was like I was seeing 2 versions of the mall at once. The empty, abandoned version that existed now, and another version, a memory of what it used to be, overlapping each other. The sound grew louder, more real. I could smell food now, grease and coffee and something sweet. It was overwhelming. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off the food court. The shadows were getting more distinct. I could almost make out features, faces, details. Then one of the shadows turned toward me. And even though I couldn't see clearly in the darkness, I knew it was looking at me, staring at me. I ran. I didn't care about protocol or staying professional. I ran back to the escalator and down to the ground floor and into my office, locking the door behind me. I spent the rest of that night sitting at my desk, watching the camera feeds, too terrified to do another patrol. In the morning, when the cleaning crew arrived, I handed in my resignation effective immediately. The mall manager tried to convince me to stay, offer me a raise, different shifts, anything. I didn't tell him the real reason I was leaving. I just said I'd gotten another job opportunity. But I talked to the security guard who'd worked the shift before me, an older guy named Frank who quit 3 weeks into the job. "You saw them too," he said when I brought it up. Not a question, a statement. "Yeah." "Third floor food court?" "Yeah." He nodded. That's where it happened. The accident. Back in '92. Kitchen fire in one of the restaurants. Spread faster than anyone expected. 3 people died. 2 employees, 1 customer. They say the customer was a little kid, 4 years old. Jesus. They rebuilt it, reopened it, but it never did well after that. People said they could still smell smoke, hear things. Eventually, all the restaurants closed. Management just gave up on that whole section. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me? And besides, the mall doesn't like it when guards talk about it. They've had trouble keeping security because of this. They'd rather just keep hiring new people and hoping they don't notice anything. I never went back to that mall, not even a shop. And I heard later that they finally closed it down completely. Couldn't keep enough stores to stay viable. The building sat empty for a couple years. Then they demolished it and built a shopping plaza with ground floor retail instead. But sometimes I drive by that location, and I think about those shadows in the food court, those people who are still there in some version of the mall that doesn't exist anymore, going through motions of eating and talking and living. And I wonder if they know they're gone. I worked maintenance at a large shopping mall for almost 10 years. It was a good job, steady union benefits, decent pay. My job was to handle repairs, keep the HVAC systems running, fix broken escalators, change lights, all that kind of thing. Most of my work was done during the day, but sometimes I'd have to come in at night for emergency repairs or to do work that couldn't be done while the mall was open. The mall was huge, built in the 1970s and expanded several times over the years. 3 levels. Over 100 stores, multiple anchor department stores at each end. During its peak, it was the biggest shopping destination in the area. By the time I started working there in 2008, it was starting to show its age, but it was still busy enough. The building itself was a maze. Not just the public areas, but the back corridors, the maintenance tunnels, the service hallways that connected everything behind the scenes. There were areas that most employees never saw, spaces that hadn't been updated since the mall first opened. Over the years, I learned the layout intimately. I could navigate the entire building, public and private spaces, with my eyes closed. I knew which corridors were shortcuts, which doors led where, which areas were supposed to be locked but never were, and I knew which areas felt wrong. Every building has them. Spaces that just feel off, cold spots that don't make sense, sections where you get an uneasy feeling, like you're being watched. Most people who work in large buildings long enough will tell you the same thing. In our mall, the wrong area was the sub-basement. This was a level below the ground floor that most people didn't even know existed. It was where we kept all the major mechanical systems, boilers, main electrical panels, water systems, storage for maintenance supplies. Only maintenance workers and some management had access. The sub-basement was older than the rest of the building, part of the original 1970s construction. It had that institutional look. Concrete floors, cinder block walls, exposed pipes and ducts, buzzing fluorescent lights. And it was always cold down there, even in summer. I avoided going down there whenever possible. Not because of the work, but because something about that space always made me uncomfortable. The acoustics were weird, sounds would echo and distort. The lighting was poor, leaving lots of shadows. And there was a smell, faint but persistent, like damp concrete and old machinery, and something else I could never identify. But one night, about 5 years into the job, I got called in for an emergency. It was around midnight on a Sunday. The mall had been closed for hours. The overnight security guard had reported water leaking through the ceiling in one of the anchor stores. That meant a pipe had burst somewhere, and I needed to find it and shut off the water before it caused serious damage. I drove to the mall, let myself into the maintenance entrance, and headed straight for the sub-basement. The leak was probably in the water main that ran through that level, and I needed to access the shut-off valves. The mall at night was always eerie, but I was used to it. Empty corridors, dim emergency lighting, silence. I'd worked plenty of overnight repairs before, but something about that night felt different. The air felt heavier. The silence felt too complete. I took the service elevator down to the sub-basement. When the doors opened, I was hit with that familiar smell, but stronger than usual, damp and cold and something else. Something organic and unpleasant. The overhead lights in the main corridor were on, but they were flickering. That buzzing, unstable light that makes everything look distorted and harsh. I grabbed my toolbox and flashlight and started walking toward the water main access. The sub-basement was laid out in a grid. Main corridors with side passages leading to different mechanical rooms. I'd been down here hundreds of times. I knew exactly where I was going, but as I walked, I started noticing things that seemed wrong. Doors that were usually closed were standing open. Equipment that should be running was silent, and there were wet footprints on the concrete floor. Not puddles from the leak. Footprints, like someone with wet shoes had been walking through the sub-basement. I stopped and looked at the prints. They were recent, still wet. They led from one of the side passages and continued down the main corridor in the direction I was heading. "Hello," I called out. "Security? Anyone down here?" No response, just my voice echoing off the concrete walls. I followed the footprints. They led me toward the water main access, which made sense. Maybe security had come down to investigate the leak before calling me. But something felt off. Why would their shoes be wet? And why weren't they answering me? The footprints stopped at a door marked Boiler Room 3. This was one of the old rooms from the original construction, rarely used anymore because we'd updated to newer systems. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see darkness beyond it. I pushed the door open wider and shone my flashlight inside. The room was large, maybe 40 feet by 60 feet, filled with old decommissioned boilers and pipes. The flashlight beam revealed a maze of machinery, shadows, and cobwebs. And standing in the far corner, facing the wall, was a figure. My heart jumped into my throat. It was a person, definitely a person, standing completely still, facing away from me. They were wearing dark clothes, and I couldn't make out any details in the poor light. "Hey!" I called out, tried to sound authoritative despite the fear in my voice. "This area is restricted. You need to leave." The figure didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there, facing the wall. I took a step into the room. "Did you hear me? You can't be down here. I'm going to have to call security." Still nothing. Not a movement. Not a sound. I was about 10 feet away now. My flashlight aimed directly at them. That's when I realized something was wrong with their proportions. They were too tall, too thin. The way they stood wasn't natural, too rigid, like a mannequin. "Hello," I said again, my voice barely above a whisper now. The figure started to turn, slowly, mechanically, rotating to face me. I didn't wait to see what it looked like. I backed out of that room, my instinct screaming at me to get away. As soon as I was in the corridor, I slammed the door shut and stood there, breathing hard, my hand shaking. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, listening. No sound from inside the room. No footsteps. No door opening. Nothing. I should have left. I should have gone back upstairs, called security, refused to work down there until someone else checked it out. But I needed to shut off that water before the leak caused more damage. That was my job. I continued down the corridor to the water main access, moving quickly, checking over my shoulder constantly. I found the burst pipe, an old section that had corroded through. I shut off the valve, stopping the leak, and radioed up to the security guard that it was handled, and I'd fix it properly in the morning. Then I got the hell out of that sub-basement. I took the elevator back up, walked through the empty mall to the maintenance entrance, and sat in my truck for 10 minutes, trying to calm down. The next day, I came back with 2 other maintenance workers to properly repair the pipe. I mentioned to them that I'd seen someone in the sub-basement the night before and asked if security had been doing any unusual patrols down there. They both got quiet. Then the older guy, Miguel, who'd worked there for 15 years, said, "You saw him." "Saw who?" "The guy in Boiler Room 3. A lot of us have seen him over the years. Usually late at night. Always in that room. Always facing the wall." "What the fuck are you talking about?" Miguel shrugged. "Nobody knows for sure. Some people say a maintenance worker died down here back in the 80s. Heart attack or something. Others say it's something else. But he's been there as long as anyone can remember. If you see him, you just leave him alone. Don't try to talk to him. Don't get too close. Just do your work and get out." "Why has no one reported this?" "People have. Management doesn't care. They say we're seeing shadows or imagination. As long as the work gets done, they don't want to hear about ghosts or whatever it is." I worked at that mall for another 5 years, but I never went back down to the sub-basement alone at night. If there was an emergency, I'd wait until morning or make sure I had at least one other person with me. And I never opened the door to Boiler Room 3 again. I worked at a bookstore in a shopping mall for about 2 years during college. It was one of those big chain bookstores, 2 floors, cafe attached, the kind of place that was already starting to struggle against online retailers but was hanging on. The mall itself was decent, busy enough during peak times, dead during weekdays. I mostly worked evenings and weekends, which fit my class schedule. The evening shifts were usually pretty quiet. We'd get some customers in a couple hours after people got off work. But by 8 p.m. or so, things would die down. The mall closed at 9 p.m., and we'd usually close our doors around the same time unless we had customers inside. The bookstore had a policy. We couldn't kick out customers who were already in the store at closing time. We had to wait for them to leave naturally. Most people were respectful. They'd notice us dimming the lights and starting to close registers and would take the hint. But occasionally, we'd get someone who would stay until 9:30 or even 10 p.m., browsing slowly, taking their time. This story happened on a Wednesday night in November, my junior year. It was cold and rainy outside, which meant the mall had been dead all evening. We'd had maybe a dozen customers total in the last 3 hours. By 8:45 p.m., the store was completely empty except for me and the shift manager, a woman named Diane, who'd worked there for years. "Thank God," Diane said, looking around the empty store. "Let's get out of here on time for once." We started our closing duties. I began straightening shelves and putting returns away while Diane counted the registers. By 8:55 p.m., we were almost done. Just needed to do a final walkthrough to make sure no one was hiding in the aisles reading, which happened occasionally. That's when I saw her, a woman maybe in her 40s, wearing a long dark coat, standing in the far corner of the second floor. I hadn't seen her come in, hadn't heard the door chime, but there she was, just standing there, staring at one of the shelves. "We've got a straggler," I called down to Diane. "Of course we do," she sighed. "Go politely let her know we're closing." I walked up the stairs to the second floor. As I got closer to the woman, something felt off. She wasn't browsing. She wasn't holding a book or even looking at the titles. She was just standing there, perfectly still, facing the shelf. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice friendly. "We're closing in just a few minutes. If you'd like to make a purchase, we need to ring you up now." She didn't respond, didn't turn around, didn't move at all. "Ma'am," I said, a little louder. Still nothing. I walked around to see her face, and that's when I felt a chill run down my spine. Her eyes were open, staring straight ahead at the bookshelf, but she wasn't seeing it. Her eyes had a distant, unfocused quality, like she was looking through the shelf at something far away, and her face was expressionless. Not calm or neutral, but blank, like a mask. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned now. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. For a moment, I thought she might be having some kind of medical emergency, a stroke or a seizure. I was about to call for Diane when the woman spoke. "It's still here." Her voice was flat, monotone, like a recording. "What's still here?" I asked. "In the walls, in the floors. It's still here." I don't understand. "Are you looking for a specific book? I can help you find it." She finally turned to look at me. Her head moved in one smooth motion, mechanical, like she was on a swivel. Her eyes focused on my face, and what I saw in them made me take a step back. They were empty, not just unfocused. Empty, like there was nothing behind them. No thought, no emotion, no person. "You should leave," she said in that same flat voice. "Before it finds you too." Then she smiled. It was the worst smile I've ever seen. Too wide, wrong, like someone who'd forgotten how smiling worked and was just pulling their lips back to show teeth. I backed away, my heart pounding. "I'm going to get my manager," I said, try and keep my voice steady. I turned and walked quickly toward the stairs, not quite running but close. When I reached the top of the stairs, I looked back. The woman was gone. Not walking away, not heading toward the other side of the floor. Just gone. The corner where she'd been standing was empty. I ran down the stairs to find Diane. "There's something wrong with that customer," I said, my voice shaking. "Something really wrong." "What do you mean?" I explained what had happened. The blank face, the strange things she'd said, the way she'd disappeared. Diane frowned. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. She was there 1 second, gone the next." We both went upstairs to look. We checked the entire second floor, every aisle, the bathrooms, the cafe area. Nothing. No one. "Maybe she left while you were coming to get me," Diane suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. We finished closing quickly, both of us on edge. We did our final check, set the alarm, and locked the doors. The mall was nearly empty now. Most of the other stores had closed, their gates pulled down. The few remaining employees were heading toward the exits. The overhead lights had dimmed to nighttime mode, and the silence was oppressive. Diane and I walked toward the parking lot exit together. Neither of us wanted to be alone. That's when we saw her again, the woman in the dark coat. She was standing at the far end of the corridor, near the entrance to one of the anchor department stores. Just standing there, staring at us. "Is that her?" Diane whispered. "Yeah." The woman started walking toward us. Not fast, but steady, her movement stiff and strange. "Let's go," Diane said. "Now." We walked quickly toward the exit, not running but definitely hurrying. I looked back over my shoulder. The woman was still following us, maintaining the same distance, that awful smile still on her face. We reached the exit and pushed through the doors into the parking lot. The cold rain was still falling, but the normalcy of the outside world was a relief. We practically ran to our cars. I sat in my car for a moment, locking the doors, watching the mall entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see the woman standing just inside, in the shadows, watching us. The next day, I asked Diane if we should report what happened to mall security or management. She said she'd think about it. But when I came in for my next shift 2 days later, she pulled me aside. I asked some of the other managers, people who worked here a long time, if they'd ever seen anything weird in the mall after hours. And there's a story. Goes back maybe 10 or 15 years. A woman died in the mall, somewhere in one of the anchor stores. I think she was shopping, had a heart attack or an aneurysm, collapsed. By the time anyone found her, it was too late. And people have seen her? Some people say they have. A woman in a dark coat, usually at closing time, usually just standing somewhere, watching. The description matches what you saw. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't believe it. I thought it was just a story. But after last night, she trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Do you believe it now? I don't know, but I know what I saw. And I know that I've worked here for 6 years, and I've never felt scared in this mall until last night. I quit that job a month later. The official reason was that I needed to focus on school, which was true, But the real reason was that I couldn't shake the memory of that woman's empty eyes and wrong smile. And I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. It's still here, in the walls, in the floors. What was still there? What was she talking about? I don't know, and I don't want to find out. The mall closed down about 3 years ago. Not enough business to keep it viable. Most of the stores left, and eventually, they just locked the doors. The building sat empty for a while, and I heard there were plans to demolish it and build something new. But I heard from a friend who works in commercial real estate that the demolition crew reported strange things during preliminary assessment. Cold spots in certain areas. Sound that didn't have any source. Feelings of being watched. One worker refused to go back after he saw someone standing on the second floor of the empty mall, watching him through a window. A woman in a dark coat. I don't know if the building's been torn down yet. I don't drive by that area anymore. I don't want to see it empty and abandoned, and I definitely don't want to see anyone standing in the windows, watching, because some things stay in the places where they died, and maybe some things are waiting for those places to empty out, so they can have them all to themselves.